Alright everybody, I have a never before seen concept for you. You know those two Mario RPGs that we got? What if we add Luigi? The year is 2003 and the Game Boy Advance is well into its life cycle, and shockingly enough there is no original Mario game in sight. Yeah, we got a couple of quality ports here or there, but nothing in terms of a brand new adventure starring the portly plumber. Despite that, Nintendo insisted on constantly giving us the same version of Mario Bros across multiple games. Why did you do this? I don't understand. And that is where newcomers AlphaDream come in, developing an RPG featuring not only Mario but his lesser known brother, Green Mario. You gotta remember here, at this point Luigi getting a headline role was kind of a big deal. Luigi's Mansion was the first time he was more than the typecast player too. We don't count Mario as missing in this house. So the idea of not only playing as Luigi, but both brothers at the same time in a brand new adventure? Well boy howdy, sign me up. It's also the game that added striped socks to Luigi's canon, so that's good to know.
Nintendo!
Classic. AlphaDream is, of course, known for this series, but at the time, these devs didn't really have much under their belt. They made Hamtaro Rainbow Rescue for GBA. That's cool. Not the first and probably not the last time I'll bring up these Hamtaro games on this channel, I swear. But more interesting, Tomato Adventure. I don't really know much about it, but it looks very similar to what they would go on to work on soon after. And that's good enough for me. It's an RPG that never left Japan, will probably never get any recognition from Nintendo ever again, and will be quite a while before a fan translation is completed so I can understand why tomatoes are the main aesthetic here. Not gonna lie, I'm very confused. As of late 2019, AlphaDream shut their doors after filing for bankruptcy. Now this doesn't mean that the series is done with, need I remind you, Nintendo owns both Mario and Luigi, but it's definitely the end of an era. This is a very fascinating franchise that I feel doesn't really get talked about all that much. They just happen to be the Mario RPGs that you find on portable consoles, and that's it. 5 games and 2 remakes, that is certainly an impressive lineup, and I figured now is a better time than ever to take a look at what this entire series is all about. Starting off with, of course, Superstar Saga. Does anybody else remember when Nintendo advertised this new sub-series using live-action shots of 2 boys playing around? That was weird. Can't say I don't have a few more questions, but hey, I got the game anyway, so clearly they were onto something. Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, aka the game where Mario and Luigi dance. Following the trend the original Super Mario RPG started, Superstar Saga tells the story of the Mushroom Kingdom under peril from a brand new threat. That of Cackletta and her assistant, Fawful. After disguising themselves to meet up with Princess Peach, they managed to steal her voice and replace it with bombs. Whoa, that's pretty sick, dude. And this is all to take control of the powerful Bean Star in order to take over the kingdom. So it's time to, of course, bring in the Mario Bros to set things right. I always loved this part here, getting to play as Toad right at the beginning. It is the only time in the game you can do this, but it does a good job letting you know right off the bat that this is going to be a bit of a different journey. I mean, for crying out loud, Toad sees Mario naked. I wouldn't want to wish that upon my worst enemies. During this opening segment, 2 of the series' prominent features start to shine. First off, the humor, primarily from Luigi. Paper Mario was certainly charming and funny as well, but more of that stuff is certainly not a bad thing. Luigi didn't even want to be on this adventure, but my boy, he didn't have a choice. And all of the original designs for the characters too, it's so cool. Whether it be these quirky redesigns of series staple characters, or brand new ones that are very much out there. It's just very pleasant and refreshing to look at. And the bosses in particular are really neat. One of them is like a hermit crab with a Christmas tree shell. Finally, my fantasy fulfilled. And we have all of this on top of exploring a brand new land, the Bean Kingdom. I don't know what compelled the developers to make a land based on beans, but hey, it works. As you progress, the story stays pretty straightforward. A couple hours in, you actually get to encounter Cackletta and the Bean Star. Tackling the main antagonist in a battle that isn't the final one is something the series would go on to do quite often, and it's kinda cool to see. But naturally, of course, that's not the end. Just when you think things are all nice and safe, Fawful takes an injured Bowser and implants him with Cackletta's soul, creating the incredibly disturbing looking Bowletta, another trend this series would work with in the future. Oh, and why is Bowser injured, you may be asking? Well, that's because after Bowser was shot out of a cannon and presumably lost his memory, this little guy here, Popple, threw a mask on him, called him Rookie, and recruited him as his partner. And after a battle that led them flying way up into the sky on an enraged Beanstar, and just as Bowser's memory is getting back to him, they all fall off and scatter. Bing bang boom, Bowser looks scary now. It's totally the lack of nose and the addition of breastplates. Cackletta really knew how to assert her dominance. At the core of the experience, yeah, this is a pretty standard, lighthearted RPG. Dare I say, a gateway RPG. A game that follows all the tropes of the genre, but simplifies them to a bare bones level to keep things straightforward and at the forefront, fun. It's a style that the previous Mario RPGs went for, but there was a lot of stuff here that makes it different than those previous attempts. And it all lies within the brothers' actions being at your fingertips at all times. Well, until one of them gets like abducted or something for a while. This game is bonkers. One brother is controlled by A and the other with B. That simple approach keeps this entire quest engaging, from controlling each of their jumps for platforming or timing their dodges when being attacked. And yeah, platforming, there's a ton of it here, and it feels great to do. And throughout the adventure, you also gain a bunch of new abilities that can be used for traversal in the overworld, and new attacks for battles. And speaking of, the battles retain their action command system as well, a must-have for RPGs of the Mario variety. And something pretty cool that I always appreciated, you learn the majority of your new moves from other duos. They really took this whole red and green pair working together thing, and went all out with it. And it immediately gives this series a unique identity. Admittedly though, the fire and lightning moves that you get do seem like a bit of an afterthought. Unlike jumping or using a hammer, there's rarely any benefit of using them in battle, and the overworld puzzles that you do use them in are far from clever, but hey, at least we get to see the brothers getting a massage. That's always nice. And then we have Bean Kingdom itself. I love this place. On paper, a lot of it does seem like your traditional Mario flair, just with beans, but a lot was actually done here to let you know that these aren't the lands that you're familiar with. For one, each section is named after some sort of synonym for laugh. Hoo Hoo Village, Chuckle Huck Woods, Tee Hee Valley. That's really clever, I like it, really adds to the cartoony charm here. And admittedly, since this is on the GBA, I remember thinking to myself for a while that the world felt pretty small. But an hour or so into the game, at the top of Hoo Hoo Mountain, there's a telescope that you can interact with. Suddenly, whoa, this place is actually huge, and you get to visit every inch of it. It's a good thing you have your trusted passport on you at all times. It may seem pretty minor, but I would argue this goes a long way to world building. There's only so much you can convey on a small screen, so getting to see this huge landscape in the palm of your hands, I love it. And there is such a handful of memorable moments sprinkled throughout the entire landscape. Moving from one area to another via a minecart segment, or riding atop of Luigi transformed into a surfboard. You get to explore a brewery that's creating a ton of the popular drink, Chocola Cola, before fighting a monster made out of Chocola Cola. After going inside Woo-Hoo University, you are being greeted by the viruses from Dr. Mario. And these spouts of water that you find early on, you can get Mario fat off of them. This game does everything. There's also that part where Luigi dresses up as Princess Peach and, not gonna lie, he nails the look. Oh, and that's right, there's also that part where Gino shows up to explain that one random minigame, and then that would be the last time he ever made an official appearance aside from a costume in Smash Brothers. I'll never forget. Playing this game is a ton of fun, but as time goes on, signs of first game in the series-itis do start to show. Things that later games would do better that end up showing some slight faults with this first attempt. Unlike the rest of the series, there are no gimmicks tying anything together. It is pure Mario and Luigi gameplay, which is fine, but just know that this is the only game in the series to not have some sort of overlying concept aside from purely going on an adventure. And also, the game is pretty short, clocking in at about 10 plus hours. Which again, totally fine, but it is also super easy. Whenever you level up, you have a choice as to where some skill points will go. Just keep adding points to attack and this game is a total cakewalk, nobody stands a chance. It's not bad since it's all still a matter of mastering the timing-based moves you have access to, but it's certainly odd to have really no incentive to grow the other stats, unless you wanna just make the game harder for yourself. The stash stat is pretty neat though, raising this grows your chances of critical hits and lowers item prices. Cool. I just don't see any reason to put any extra points into it. Granted, I guess it's not too different than playing Paper Mario and strictly upgrading flower points, but I still feel like you have to strategize around your decision there. Here, whether or not you main the attack stat really just makes the game easier or harder for yourself. That's it. The simplest bosses that took a few tries for me when I was younger don't stand a chance anymore. They go down in like a minute. Honestly, I know these were small complaints, but they're the only ones I have. I love this game to death. I just don't want to come off as biased, okay? Okay, thank you. Regardless of how you lay out your stat points, the end of the adventure is still pretty cool. After all the trials and tribulations you face along your journey, you eventually travel to Bowser's floating castle, rocking that same brick and lava aesthetic that we're all familiar with. And within, you get to fight the returning Koopalings. I always loved this series of fights. While most people remember New Super Mario Bros. Wii as the return of the Koopalings, yeah, this game did it earlier. It's a great use of them too. Each one is presented with a different gimmick rather than being slightly more powerful attack sponges. I am a big fan. The platforming here is really solid too. Bowser's castle in this game is just sweet overall. And then there's the final Cackletta fight. Oh man, the final fight. The initial form is a bit of a pushover if you keep attacking her head on, especially with an all-out attack stat. Holy cow, like 30 seconds is all it took, I swear. But then she inhales you and you get to fight Cackletta's soul. The atmosphere is eerie. The music, heart-pounding. You start with 1 health. Okay, yeah, this is cool and all, but it is also a bit of a problem. While this would definitely set the stage for future epic final fights in the franchise, a common complaint with this game in particular is the difficulty spike with this encounter. And to be honest, it is the reason why I do like to play this game on the self-induced, quote, easy mode. Basically, it's a fight that you can get good at, but the game doesn't properly prepare you for what's in store. Dodging attacks is a lot more difficult, opening up the weak spot takes a decent amount of time, she'll regularly heal herself, and if you screw up and die, you gotta go back and do the fight before it once again. Since I've beaten this game multiple times already, this is a total breeze, but I have heard many stories of people who have played this game for the first time hating this fight, and I can see why. If you are at all familiar with this series, you already know that final battles here are a big deal, and this one, unfortunately, is one of the weaker ones. But hey, with enough perseverance, Cackletta's soul is gone for good. Bowser returns to normal, and before he wakes up, we leave him to fall with the crashing ship. Poor guy didn't know what hit him. With the day saved, the gang ride off into the sunset, wrapping up the first adventure in this new series. At the end of the day, Superstar Saga is a simple, fun, and funny RPG. There's like that one escort mission in the desert that kinda sucks, and there's a fetch quest near the end of the game that does feel like a bit of padding, but they're all relatively minor blemishes, honestly. If anything, that final fetch quest is the only time in the game you're encouraged to explore the entirety of Bean Bean Kingdom, so you can get to the paths that you pass over by going through the main adventure. It is definitely padding, that's just what it is, but I always enjoyed running around to gather fruit, to feed the different colored Yoshis, to spice up their special movie theater. That's just cool. Any place showing a Kirby and Starfy movie has my support 100%. There's a few side quests that you can tackle too, like making a bunch of shirt patterns. Minigames that are mandatory during the adventure have some high score challenges when you return to them, and probably the most famous of all, beans. Back in the Star Beans Cafe, you can take a ton of different beans that you've collected along the journey and assist Professor E. Gadd with making a bunch of different blends to gain some stat points and also obtain some extra prizes. But what's known about this quest isn't what's here, it's what isn't here. Taking a look at the cut content from the game shows that not only were you originally making these blends for E. Gadd, but also for other Nintendo characters. Captain Olimar, Samus, Link, Fox McCloud, the Excitebike Racer. This would have been so cool in the final product. You already get items based on these characters too. It makes their removal seem all the weirder. Sadly, it would be a few more years before we get to see Wario letting his gas loose onto the world. But after all this time, Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga remains one of the most memorable Mario adventures. It is part of the 1-2 punch that made Luigi a character worth caring about, and it is easily one of the finest games the GBA has to offer. Oh yeah, the 3DS version. 14 years later, we were graced with a remake on the much more powerful 3DS, and it's pretty sweet. I wanted to focus on the original release for this video since it holds up so well, but to be honest, this is probably the best way to experience this game nowadays. It looks better, it sounds cleaner, there's a ton of quality of life improvements like full analog control, there's an easier way to swap between all your bros abilities. When you're in battle, the alternate bros moves are now separated from the original ones, which is awesome because now you're not required to remember a few button combos. And you can speed up cutscenes, thank God. There is amiibo support as well, which I mean, it's a thing. We got some neat figures out of it, so that's nice, but the content itself, not too compelling, honestly. The biggest argument against this version is the, quote, lack of charm in the transition to a new console. And trust me, I love me a good pixelated aesthetic as much as the next guy, but damn, this game still looks super good. There are certainly elements that should have been brought over to maintain that original identity, like, why did you change the tree? That was far from the biggest issue about the original game. But when you look at the entire picture, it's really not too much of a downgrade, I feel. And unlike the other 3DS games in this series that opted for 3D worlds, for this remake, it plays on 2D art instead, with much more advanced lighting effects, and it is pure eye candy. This also gives us a smooth 60 FPS too, and man, it is so good to see up close. And even though Cackletta is still relatively tough here, it's like one of the only things in this game that's a 3D model, and that's pretty sick. There's no Geno anymore though, that kinda sucks. And those movie posters that I mentioned earlier got changed to more fitting art for the series, which I guess is understandable. I still want a Starfy movie though. And this game also doesn't support 3D, I know, contain your tears. In general though, the pros definitely outweigh the cons. Just don't play that new Bowser's Minions mode. Wow, it's so bad. It provides more story details to show you what's happening when Mario and Luigi are off somewhere else, and that's kinda neat, but oh man, is this ever the most boring thing I've ever done in my life. It's like the squad building thing of a bunch of the game's enemies, and as a commander, you issue orders to your group, and on paper, sounds pretty cool, kinda sounds like Pikmin, but in practice, oh man, there is so much time that goes by with you barely doing anything. I can't imagine a single instance where this isn't the worst thing ever. You often literally do nothing. This is insulting. This Beans War. I genuinely appreciate the effort to add something new here, I do, but I would argue the core game is so strong, this shoehorned side mode simply wasn't necessary. At the end of the day, it is nice having all of these games in this series now playable on 3DS. I love that Game Boy Advance version, I have so much nostalgia for it, but it's really cool being able to now have everything under one roof. That makes this remake worth it for that alone. Yeah, you're gonna want to remember I said that for the future. If you enjoy Mario RPGs, you already know that Superstar Saga is one of the finest. It does sort of fumble at the very end, and that entire side mode in the 3DS version is hot garbage, but on the whole, fantastic game, and it is the great start to a fantastic series with many highs and many lows. But let's say you're not into RPGs, but for whatever reason, this cartridge in particular really stuck out to you. Well, need I remind you, you can totally bypass the core adventure and just play Arcade Mario Bros. Why did they do this?